Hello everybody and a very, very warm welcome to Spa for the second race, the sixth round of the 2013 European F3 Open, where the championship could not be tighter as we prepare for 13 laps of the legendary Spa-Francorchamps circuit. 7-kilometre challenge awaits the drivers. This, the sixth of 8 stops on the European F3 Open calendar. They've already been to Paul Ricard, the Algarve, Nürburgring, Jerez and Silverstone. They have Monza and Catalonia to come. Well, hello from myself, Ben Evans, on a chilly but fortunately dry day here in the Ardennes. It has rained pretty much incessantly from about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon through until a couple of hours ago. Unfortunately, the rain has stopped, the sun has begun to peek out, and we have got a dry track for the drivers, where once more in pole position is yesterday's race winner, the try driver Sandy Stuvik, who didn't have the greatest qualifying session this morning. He actually brought out a red flag, but Stuvik is on pole. Second on the grid is Nelson Mason. He had a fantastic drive yesterday from 22nd up to 4th. He currently lies 4th in the championship, but very confident if he can get in the leading slipstream that he could challenge for the win, as could Ed Jones. He, like Nelson Mason, has already got 3 wins to his name this year. He lies second in the championship, 15 points adrift of Stuvik. 4th on the grid, a little bit of an upset to the established order, but went very, very well in wet qualifying earlier on today. Vicky Piria, the former GP3 racer, who has thus far this year had the best result of 4th in wet weather at Paul Ricard, was absolutely flying. 5th on the grid, Alexander Toro, the Spanish driver, 5th in the championship. Faded a little bit in yesterday's race, but he is in search of a podium finish. The Uruguayan fans out in force for their man Santiago Urrutia, but he does not have a brilliant qualifying session. Will line up behind Mario Marasca in the BVM car. A good qualifying period this morning for the BVM team, and Marasca qualifying strongly, so it's 7th place on the grid that Santiago Urrutia must console himself with. He's finished 3rd, albeit slightly distantly in yesterday's race, but the Uruguayan driver always one to watch. The first, the Copper class cars, Lara Zaf 308, Gerardo Nieto, 8th on the grid. Nieto, who had a suspension issue late in the first race of the weekend, will be looking to bounce back with a good finish. 9th on the grid, the Israeli driver, the first of the Emilio de Vallota team cars, Yarin Stern, coming into today 7th in the standings. And then completing the top 10, Polish driver Artur Janos, yet to score a point this season, but he was very, very impressive yesterday, where he really mastered the tricky conditions in the early stages. 11th on the grid, another season's best qualifying for Denis Nagulin, the Russian driver in his 2nd year with the Campos squad. Results haven't quite come yet, but from 11th he could well get himself into the points today. So the grid beginning to be cleared, and this is how they line up in full, with pole position Sandy Stuvik, alongside him Nelson Mason, row 2, Ed Jones and Vicky Piria, row 3, Alexander Torrell and Mario Marasca. Santiago Urrutia a lot to do from 7th, but this is a circuit you can overtake. Gerardo Nieto, the first of the Copper class cars, in 8th, and then Chaewon Lim, the second of the Copper class cars, down in 12th, just behind the Russian driver Denis Nagulin. Alexandra Kugno, who was on the front row yesterday, has to console himself with 13th, and Brandon Maisano, making his F3 Open debut this weekend, work to do from 14th. Hector Hurst a long way down in 15th. Cameron Schweinum, the Copper class championship leader now, starting 16th, 2 places clear of his principal rival, Richard Gonda. Jonathan Legret got himself in the points yesterday in his first outing in 4 years, as he lines up ahead of Andre Saravia, then Valerio Carballo and Tommaso Mencini, completing the 12th row. Sean Walkinshaw we saw on the Copper class podium yesterday, but from 25th it's going to be a big ask if he can move himself up the order. Damiano Favoranti and Huan Zhu. Zhu just struggling to adapt a little bit to the F312 car that he's in this weekend. So the car's off on their green flag formation lap. It is a 13 lap or 35-minute race, and if you're new to the European F3 Open, just to explain, there are 2 classes, as we've alluded to. There is the principal class, which is for the Dallara F312 chassis. There is the Copper class, which is for the slightly older Dallara F308 chassis. All the cars run on a control compound Dunlop tyre. They also all have control engine, gearbox and other parts supplied by the GT Sport organisation, which puts a premium on driver and engineer development to get what they can in terms of setup from the cars. It also keeps the costs affordable, and that is why this is continuing to be the best supported Formula 3 championship in Europe. In terms of the title battle, it is very, very tight. Sandy Stuvik leads the way from Ed Jones by just 15 points, and the further 22 points back from Jones is Santiago Urrutia, and he in turn has got Nelson Mason snapping on his heels. So it's the two drivers from RP Motorsport, Stuvik and Urrutia, the two drivers from Team Westtech, Jones and Mason, who are looking most likely to challenge for the European F3 Open crown. They've got 5 races, including today, to go. And Formula 3 racing always spectacular here at Spa, because this is a circuit where the drivers can really take advantage of the slipstream, particularly along the lengthy Kemmel Straight, because strange as it may sound, these Formula 3 cars have actually got, relatively speaking, far more grip than they do power, and that means that the premium is based on corner speed, it's placed on corner exit speed, and also taking advantage in the slipstream. A driver who we have seen on more than one occasion this year racing his way through the pack is the man we were just watching, the teenage Uruguayan Santiago Urrutia, graduating to Formula 3 this year after sweeping all before him in the Formula Arbath Championship last year. And if you are so minded to look for Archive Motorsports and various internet video sites, then the Formula Arbath race that Urrutia starred in from Monza last year in support of the European F3 Open is well worth finding. He can really race through the pack, and that is what he's going to have to do today from 7th on the grid. Great to see Gerardo Nieto going well in qualifying earlier on to head the Copper class field, because he's had a lot of pace this year. Nieto unfortunately seems to have more often than not being caught out in other people's instance. Yesterday he was one of several drivers who spun at the source for the first time, and then late in the race had a suspension issue. Well, this is the first truly dry running that they've really had this weekend in the European F3 Open. It was very hot for testing on Friday, but then yesterday's race got underway as a shower came down. This morning conditions went from atrocious to slightly less bad during the qualifying session. To start with, it was very wet, but as the red flags came out, delayed proceedings, the final 6-minute burst, there was just the beginnings of a dry line that was emerging. All the drivers only had the opportunity to do 1 or 2 flying laps in that period, but it's given us a grid that looks a little bit different to how we may have expected it to appear. It also means the likes of the BVM cars that really master the wet conditions may have work on their hands in terms of the now slightly warmer but emphatically drier weather that greets the drivers for the race. So Sandy Stuvik, 2 wins to his name this year, the tyre driver, not finished below 5th all season long. He has been such a consistent performer. He shares the front row with Nelson Mason, the Canadian driver, who has been blindingly fast. He has had 3 victories, including the double at Jerez, but he's also had 3 retirements as well along the way. But a good finish today from Mason, particularly if he can overhaul Stuvik, could well bring him back into the championship fight. So on the front row of the grid, it's Stuvik, which is the black, orange and grey car. The all-blue car of Nelson Mason lines up alongside him as the last couple of rows are about to get into position. The RP Motorsport team watch on nervously. Saud Al Faisal will bring his car to its marks, and then we'll get the green flag from the marshal at the rear of the pack, and then we'll be going racing for the 12th time this season in the European F3 Open. Everything would appear to be in position and ready to go. We're waiting for the green flag, which is waved now, so it's eyes to the gantry time. The red lights about to come on. When they go out, we'll be racing here at Spa. The lights are on, the revs rise, and away we go. It's a poor start from Nelson Mason. It's a wretched start from Vicky Piria, and Sandy Stuvik, though, able to convert the advantage. It's Mason who'll turn in to the source in second position. Up to third place has come Alexander Torres. So it's Ed Jones of the immediate front runners who's come out of it badly, and Vicky Piria as well has suffered slightly, but Jones has found his way already back into third position as they plunge down towards Eau Rouge for the first time. So it's Sandy Stuvik who leads, Nelson Mason second, Ed Jones third, Alexander Torres it is in fourth. And then in 5th place is Vicky Piria, looking to fight back as they all take advantage of the slipstream coming out of Radion and down the Kemmel Straight. And Sandy Stuvik having to defend on both sides from the Team Westec cars. It's Jones to the inside, Mason to the outside. It's Ed Jones who takes the lead of the race into Les Combes, and over he goes in the back of the shot. And that is Santiago Urrutia, it would appear, who's been launched. And the car inverted, bumping across. Yes, it is Urrutia's car, so the RP Motorsport driver, 3rd in the championship standings, locking wheels, and that may well there is the good news. Santiago Urrutia out of the car and hopping away, but that was a high-speed roll for Urrutia. And is that going to bring out the safety car? Suspect it might do. Indeed it does. So the race getting itself underway, immediately brought under pause, and it all got very, very busy into Les Combes for the first time. And there's more incidents behind, and as the car's slammed behind the safety car, we've cut away, and a very, very nasty accident, it would appear, behind the safety car. One of the cars involved launched into a multiple barrel roll, and it was the cars at the back of the field not realising the safety car boards had come out. And I think it's possibly Nicholas Pola in the DAV car that had the worst of that. And the race, unsurprisingly, has been stopped. The track has been completely blocked, and here we see it again, and they all slowed down. They fanned out looking for space, and you can see it's one of the DAV cars absolutely launched into the air. Unfortunately, the number has of course been ripped off, and then subsequent contact from another car, and so a very, very nasty incident that has brought the race to a halt. This is the incident that originally brought out the safety car. It all just got very busy into Les Combes for the first time, and just interlocking wheels, and it was Santiago Urrutia who got flipped into the air, and Urrutia out of his car. He has walked away. Understandably, the car won't be in a position for the restart. Fortunately, he is uninjured. We will, and most importantly, the driver, I think it was Pola, that was pitched into that horrific barrel roll, is out of the car and would appear to have walked away. Cameron Twynham, another of the drivers who was caught up in that, as was Trino Rojas as well. And in an incident of that severity, the most important thing is to see the drivers walking away. The damage can be dealt with, but in particular it was the DAV car of Nicholas Pola that was the one that caused the most concern, because not only was the car launched into multiple barrel roll, it was then impacted by another car just as it had come to rest. But you can see Pola, not unsurprisingly, being escorted to the medical car to get checked over, but that he got out of the car under his own steam is incredible. So let's see how it all unfolded. Twynham was impacting. It was Pola who got launched into the air, and the car rolling, I make that 7 or 8 tons, but here is the very nasty bit when another car coming to halt makes further contact, launches the car into the air, and very, very pleasing to see that the German driver escaped from that uninjured. This is the Santiago Urrutia incident. The car flipped, I think, by Yarin Stern, it was, who just brushed wheels with Uruguay. And we also saw Vicky Piria come into trouble. Ed Jones and Sandy Stuvik also got involved in the mess. So this is not going to be the work of a moment for the marshals and circuit staff here at Spa to recover all the cars that have been involved. The other driver involved, I suspect, is Valeria Carballo. It certainly would appear to be one of the Campos cars. It's come to halt. Che-Wan Lim. Also, so it is Valeria Carballo in the Campos car. Che-Wan Lim. Saud Al Faisal has been caught up in that. Hector Hurst, the tall figure as well at the back of the field. We've already identified that Nicholas Pola and Cameron Twynham were caught in that as well. So thumbs up from the drivers, because whenever you have an incident like that, the most important thing is to see everybody getting out of the car under their own steam. So we're now going to have, I think, here at Spa, a reasonably lengthy delay, because there are several cars very badly damaged around the circuit that are going to require recovery. In terms of the order in which they've come back to the grid, it was Ed Jones who was leading at the point at which the red flag came out. It was then Sandy Stuvik in second, Sons Torrell in third. Nelson Mason had slipped to fourth. So the bright yellow car you sit at the front of your shot, that's Cameron Twynham. And disappointingly for Twynham, he was coming into today's race with a 4-point lead in the copper class over Richard Gonda. Gonda now is going to a reasonable chance of possibly overhauling Twynham. So the marshals being allowed to the grid, because we haven't completed a full racing lap, the order as to which they will line up in remains to be seen. All the while, of course, every available recovery truck here at Spa is being taken over to the scene of the incident. See the marshals, as ever, doing a fantastic job, and the marshals really are the unsung army of motorsport. They're all unpaid volunteers. They across the world, such enthusiasts, always supporting motorsport. There is the car of Santiago Urrutia, and that was the incident at Les Combes that brought out the safety car. It was then, as the drivers slowed into the double gauche for the safety car, some of those at the back of the field caught out by the extent to which those at the front had lowered the pace, and that triggered the multi-car incident that has eliminated several drivers. So we'll see then how the 2/3 of a lap unfolded. Off the line, it wasn't such a good getaway from Nelson Mason. It was a good start, though, from pole position from Sandy Stuvik. Vicky Piria, also from fourth in the grid, wasn't cleanly away. As they went through the source, it was all clean, but it was then down the Kemmel Straight into Les Combes, where Jones, Mason and Stuvik all got tangled up with each other further behind, a chain reaction, and Santiago Urrutia, a nasty and bumpy ride on his roll hoop across the rumble strip at Les Combes. He walked away fine. That brought out the safety car, which then triggered this horrific incident, and in particular Nicholas Pola in the DAV car being launched into a horrendous series of barrel rolls. All the drivers involved in the crash, pleased to report, out of the car under their own steam, and as you can see, they are waiting for transport back to the pits. In the meantime, work underway on the grid, getting the cars prepared for the restart. As soon as we know how long the restart is going to be over and when we're expecting to get the race underway, then of course we will let you know. For now, though, the cars on the grid, we've got a reduced body of mechanics there. That is the car of Sean Walkinshaw, who has also been involved in the incident. So the cars on the grid, just a single mechanic with the Slave battery, looking to also just chat to the drivers, because this is something that no driver ever enjoys, because the way that these drivers prepare for these races, as Jonathan Legree also in the pits and then caught up in the incident, Team Westech car minus its rear wing. These drivers really work very hard on getting the sports psychology just right. They work very hard on getting themselves prepared for the races, to the extent they're absolutely perfectly keyed up in terms of the focus, in terms of the adrenaline when the race gets underway, as it should. And so a delay like this, it's very hard to keep the concentration, particularly if you're looking at a reasonably lengthy delay like the one that we've got underway there. There is the car of Nicholas Pola, which has got very little left of it, but as you can see, the key safety structures, the roll hoop obscured behind the rear wing, remained intact. The core chassis of the car and the carbon fibre tub, which is designed to protect the driver, that has remained intact. And therefore, that is how Nicholas Pola has been able to escape from the incident. He, if you've just joined us, got out of the car under his own steam. He's been taken to the medical centre as a precaution. All the other drivers involved in the accident that's brought out the red flag here at Spa, they are all unharmed. And this is what caused it. This is the accident that brought out the safety car. Santiago Urrutia flipped onto his roll hoop, and then a bumpy ride across the rumble strip. Urrutia absolutely fine, and scrambling out of his inverted RP Motorsport car. This, in terms of the championship, disappointing for Urrutia, because, to explain, although there are 16 races in the European F3 Open, actually it's only the best 14 scores for the driver that count. And Santiago Urrutia has already had a duff weekend. That came at Paul Ricard at the start of the season, where he finished outside the points. He's been in the points for every race thus far, but he can't afford to drop any more points. So therefore, a non-finish today is very, very bad news for him, as car of Nicholas Pola is winched towards the flatbed. There's only possibly the car of Saud El Faisal that will require recovery. Then some sweeping work needed from the marshals, and then we will be able to get the action underway. We've also got placement work underway, and again you get a sense of just how strong these Formula 3 cars are, because that is the section of rumble strip that Santiago Urrutia's car travelled across at high speed upside down. Unfortunately for the F3 Open teams, they are going to have an awful lot of repair work to do before we head to Monza for the penultimate round of the championship. You'll be able to see that, of course, live in HD through the GT Open website, www.gtopen.tv, and the Monza races for the European F3 Open on the 5th and 6th of October. Another classic slipstreaming circuit where we should be in for some fantastic racing. And then the F3 Open season wraps up at the Circuit de Catalunya on the 9th and 10th of November. And could we have a finale to the championship as dramatic as we did last year, when Gianmarco Raimondo and Nicolo Schiro went all the way to the wire, with eventually it being Nicolo Schiro, who had been well out of contention for the championship in the early stages, coming through to score a sensational championship victory. So whilst the recovery work continues, it's just on the entry to Double Gauche, and actually this is sometimes a section of the circuit which does cause problems when the safety car comes out, because the drivers are coming downhill very quickly out of the preceding left-hander. It's quite hard to judge the speed of the cars in front, and there's been a number of instances here, most notably in the Lotus Cup Europe, where a couple of years ago they had quite a not dissimilar incident when the safety car was scrambled for an accident early in the race at Les Combes. The front runners reduced the pace. Those at the back of the pack couldn't see the pace being reduced and got tangled up in a not dissimilar fashion. So Valerio Carballo has been able to get back to the pits, but frustration for the Venezuelan driver Carballo, who finished 21st in last year's F3 Open, running in the Copper class, but this year, with the exception really of the round at Portimao where she finished 7th, she's at best been to the back end of the top 10. So another chance to see the incident that has brought out the red flag. So discussion going on between Carballo and the mechanics. And, well, hopefully we'll get the race underway as soon as we possibly can. Let's have a look then at yesterday's highlights, because we had a fantastic race yesterday that got underway in treacherous conditions. As today, it was Sandy Stuvik who jumped into the early advantage. As they arrived into the hairpin at the source, they found it was a little bit more slippery than they expected. Rod Nieto, one of several drivers who got tipped into a spin. Amazingly, though, nobody got entangled with each other, and the racing was able to continue. And what a race it was. The early stages were utterly ferocious, keenly competitive throughout the field, as we saw some of the drivers carving up through the pack. One of the drivers who really did start was the Polish driver Artur Janos. Eventually, though, he faded as the race went on. That was Yarin Stern picking his way past him, and then Valeria Carballo, who we saw moments ago talking to her mechanics, Campos Racing in the pit lane, also gaining ground. Another brilliant battle for the Copper Class honours between Richard Gonda and Cameron Schweinum. It was Gonda who had the upper hand, but eventually Schweinum came through to take the win as Gonda retired late in the race. At the front, we had a very tense battle ongoing throughout the course of the race between Ed Jones and Sandy Stuvik. Sean Walkinshaw and Tommaso Mencini had a good tussle, but it was Sandy Stuvik who, having withstood the opening salvo from Ed Jones, came through to claim the victory, his second win of the season, converting pole position in perfect fashion and once more building out his advantage over Ed Jones. It was Santiago Urrutia who completed the rostrum from Nelson Mason. Mason, as we mentioned a little bit earlier on, who came all the way from 22nd on the grid. Rueful looking Sean Walkinshaw And Walkinshaw, almost unique amongst all the drivers in the field, because not only is he a very competitive driver, but he also runs the Sean Walkinshaw Racing Team, which competes in a couple of junior single-seater categories in UK motorsport. So Sean Walkinshaw barely ever has a weekend off from motor racing commitments, because if he's not driving himself, then he is somewhere busy supervising the activities of his team. Unfortunately, Walkinshaw looking like he won't be going any further. We've seen some shots of that car up close, and I think, unfortunately, not only were a large number of cars involved in that incident, but also they have really picked up quite a lot of damage. It's not like necessarily the sort of incident you might expect to see, say, at La Source, where you've got wheels locked together and there's not too much damage done, and the cars could potentially get themselves back towards the grid, but actually a bit more serious than that. There is Cameron Twynham, and very, very disappointing for Twynham, because yesterday he took the lead of the Copper class from Richard Gonda, really was having the momentum begin to swing towards him. He was one of the drivers who was tagged by those behind, pitched into the spin, caught the damage on the car, and then led to that chain reaction that has brought the halt to the race. So the race clock is ticking onwards. So essentially, when the race does get underway, the duration of the race is going to be the amount of time that we've got left remaining. Fortunately, the work that's been done over on the far side of the circuit would suggest that we're not going to have too much longer to wait until the race gets underway. We've got the cars potentially slightly out of position, so from the commentary box window, which immediately overlooks pole position, we have got marshals being scrambled to the grid with the revised grid positions as Igor Urian's car and that of Trino Rojas return to the paddock area on the back of a flatbed truck. The marshals are in the process of returning back to their marshals posts, which means as soon as we can get the cars into the right formation on the grid, then we're going to be getting the race, 12th race of the 2013 European F3 Open season, back underway in the next few moments' time. The way the cars are lined up on the grid would suggest that they're going to be the classification at which they were at the point the safety car came out. So looking likely to be Ed Jones starting from pole position, and then Sandy Stuvik in second, Alexander Torrell in third, and Nelson Mason in fourth. So the race is going to get underway in just over 2 minutes' time behind the safety car, and then when the safety car peels in, they will be able to get themselves back into action. That means we're going to probably get something in the region of 20 minutes worth of race time here at Spa, and what was shaping up to be an absolutely brilliant race in those early stages, really fantastic slipstreaming down the Kemmel Straight on the first lap, will resume. And this is going to be another real test of the drivers. It shows why Formula 3 racing is seen as the University of Motorsport, because not only do the drivers learn about engineering and car setup, about the importance of testing, the importance of racecraft, the importance of putting together the perfect lap during qualifying, but it's moments like this, when you have a lengthy red flag stoppage, then the race gets underway on the safety car, and they've got to find that focus, the energy that they had when the race started originally, the best part of now half an hour ago. They need to find all of that energy, all of that focus, and look to get the very best result that they possibly can. So the cars, drivers being given the countdown boards by the starter now, and the safety car all poised and ready. So very, very shortly the race will get back underway under the safety car, and then we should have some fantastic dicing to look forward to as the universal signal to start up the engines is given by the marshals on the grid. The final couple of handshakes from the mechanics to their drivers. They clear themselves out of the way, and so we are about to get the action underway once more here at Spa. The last couple of marshals just moving clear. The 15-second board is shown to the drivers. The teams return to their positions on the pit wall. The safety car gets underway, and the field file off. So it is going to be Ed Jones at the head of the queue. Jones looking for his 4th victory of the season. Sandy Stuvik in 2nd position. 3rd place is Alexander Toril. 4th place for this restart, Nelson Mason. Up to 5th has come Yarin Stern. And then in 6th place, it's Gerardo Nieto, who heads the copper class from Che Wan Lim. In 8th place, Alexandra Kugno. 9th place is Denis Nagulin. And then in 10th, the Russian driver, Alexei Chuklin. So the field underway behind the safety car. The safety car just out for this solitary lap, and then the race will get back underway. I'm pleased to report I've just been given official word from the GT Sport organisers to confirm what we could see from the TV pictures, that everybody involved in all those incidents that brought out the red flag, they're absolutely fine, and it really is testament to the fantastic safety standards that we see with contemporary motorsport, in particular these Formula 3 cars, and of course all the safety standards rigorously applied by the GT Sport organisation who run the European F3 Open and International GT Open. So all the drivers, pleased to assure you, are absolutely fine from those 2 very, very nasty looking incidents. So the race clock ticks downwards, and now, once more, after that hiatus, we can really focus our attention on who is going to prevail in this 12th round of the season, because in terms of the championship, well, we've still got the classic battle between Jones and Stuvik that is well underway. We've also got, for Nelson Mason, who is going to be starting in 4th when the safety car peels in, the second of the blue cars in the queue. This is his opportunity to jump Santiago Urrutia and move up into 3rd place in the championship standings. To do that, though, he has got to find a way past Alexander Toril, first of all. Toril, who's 5th in the standings, also has the opportunity to get himself onto the rostrum, which would be his 3rd trip of the season, having been at Paul Ricard and Portimao, but also to put a little bit of pressure on his teammate Santiago Urrutia. So of the championship front runners, it really is Santiago Urrutia who is the one who's most lost out. In the copper class, it has an even bigger effect on the copper class championship because Cameron Twynham is not there. However, Richard Gonda and Tommaso Mencini, the 2 drivers snapping at Twynham's heels in terms of the copper class standings, well, they both been able to find their way through the incident, so they are amongst the 17 cars that have been able to take to the resumption of this race. Safety car coming in at the end of this lap, and then we will get back into green flag conditions, and will Ed Jones be able to do to Sandy Stuvik what Stuvik did to Jones yesterday in terms of just being able to build that buffer sufficient that he doesn't come under too much pressure in the slipstream along the Kemmel Straight and also along this section of the circuit towards Blanchimont? Will this be the opportunity for Stuvik, Alexander Toril and Nelson Mason all to come back and put the pressure onto Jones? So it's Jones will have responsibility of pulling the pin and getting the race back underway into green flag conditions as he backs the pack up now as they head into the final chicane. He's going to have just under or just over 20 minutes with which to play with here at Spa as the 12th race of the 2013 European S3 Open gets back underway, and it's Jones who pulls the pin and tries to move clear of Sandy Stuvik. Stuvik right with him. Toril under pressure though from Nelson Mason, and Mason looks to challenge for 3rd into La Source, and he maybe caught Alexander Toril napping there on the restart. Brilliant stuff from Nelson Mason. He takes 3rd position as the pair of them sprint down towards Eau Rouge. Toril though right in the slipstream. Also Alexandra Kugno trying to find a way past Alexei Chuklin as diving through Eau Rouge. It's all getting a little bit tight throughout the field, but they're all cleanly through on this restarted race. Vicky Piri and Mario Maraska climbing up through the order as Sandy Stuvik takes advantage of the slipstream and moves into the lead of the race. So it's Stuvik who goes first. It's Jones still in 2nd. Nelson Mason remains in 3rd despite the best efforts of Alexander Toril. Or does he? Mason launched over the curbs, just slithered out wide, and still not a huge degree of grip to be found at Les Combes. Also problems as well for Liam Venter. He loses ground to Mario Maraska. And also Richard Gonda. So disappointment there for Liam Venter. It's still just a little bit slippery offline. It's quite a chilly day, and that's why some of the drivers are maybe not finding the grip as they would have hoped. So for Nelson Mason in particular, he's got work to do. He slips down to 5th now, behind Yarin Stern. Stern taking his turn at Toro. There is Richard Gonda doing battle with Vicky Piria. Richard Gonda, probably as a result of that mistake from the inventor, is going to be up to 3rd in the copper class. Meanwhile, the battle at the head of the field is exactly as it was yesterday, which is between Ed Jones and Sandy Stewart. Then we've got Torrell in 3rd, Yarin Stern in 4th, Nelson Mason in 5th. There is Richard Gonda, 3rd in the copper class, behind the battling Gerardo Nieto and Chae-Wan Lim. Tommaso Mencini and Mario Marasca get locked into battle as well. Meanwhile, the race leader, Sandy Stuvik, comes out of Blanchimont into the chicane. He's got Ed Jones all over his tail in the slipstream, looking if he possibly can to try and find a way through. They hit the brakes, they move down through the gears, they ride the curbs to the right, then the left, and sprint through to essentially complete the 3rd lap of the race, the point at which it was stopped and brought under suspension. And Jones is within half a second here of Sandy Stuvik, and that is near enough to potentially be able to challenge on the run down the Kemmel Straight. In the meantime, Alexei Chuklin coming under pressure from Artur Janos and also Brandon Maisano. It all gets very busy into La Source, and Chuklin does well not to interlock wheels, but he might lose out there to Maisano. Maybe not, as they plunge down towards Eau Rouge. Also a very, very brave move being pulled off there by Alexandra Cugno, as Ed Jones has got the slipstream on Sandy Stuvik. They came through Radion, the front two side by side, sprinting along the Kemmel Straight, and Jones moves across to see off Sandy Stuvik. Stuvik boxed to the outside line, he can't go through, so Ed Jones reclaims the lead of the race. The battle for 3rd, 4th and 5th is increasingly intense as well. It's Torrell, orange helmet, in 3rd, the black car, Yarin Stern in 4th, 5th place the blue machine of Nelson Mason. Difficulty for them is they've already probably lost the toe to the leaders. In 6th place it's Gerardo Nieto, who is leading the copper class. Up to 6th has possibly come Alexandra Cugno. Indeed, Alexandra Cugno is there in 7th, so that means Chae-Wan Lim demoted to 8th. See Chuklin, Dennis Nagulin, Brandon Maisano still busy playing wheel to wheel as we go back to the fight for 4th and 5th. So leading 7 cars really all the way back to Alexandra Cugno, closing up on each other. In particular, the fight for 3rd could very, very shortly become a 5-way tussle. Great to see Gerardo Nieto involved. Meanwhile, at the head of the pack, Ed Jones is doing everything he can to romp clear of Sandy Stuvik, and Jones has just pulled out a second over Stuvik through the middle sector on this lap. So Jones moving clear. He wants to get far enough ahead of Stuvik by the end of this lap such that Stuvik can't challenge him in the slipstream along the Kemmel Straight next time through. As they come out of Blanchimont, Jones's advantage would appear to be out to over a second. Stuvik, though, trying to close in. Rides the curbs, chases Jones down as the pair of them exit and sprint their way on towards La Source. And Jones leads it by 0.8 of a second, so Stuvik might be able to close up in the slipstream, but whether or not it'll be near enough to challenge remains to be seen. The place that's most likely to change on this lap is probably going to be Nelson Mason, trying to get back into 4th, as we see already the change for 6th. Alexandra Cugno has picked his way past Gerardo Nieto, Dennis Nagulin and Vicky Piria. Alexei Chuklin is doing battle as Valerio Carballo watches on somewhat frustratedly from the Campos Racing garage. Nagulin and Piria almost side by side into Eau Rouge, but there's no way through there for Vicky Piria. She cannot find a way around Nagulin. Instead, she's slow to Radion. Meanwhile, battle for 4th and 5th is very tight. Stuvik closes up on Jones in the slipstream but can't challenge. Torrell should remain in 3rd when we see the shot widen out. There is Alexander Torrell, and Yarin Stern holds on to 4th. So Nelson Mason not able to find a way through as they arrive into the Bruxelles hairpin. And this frustrating for Nelson Mason, because he was very briefly in 3rd, had that trip across the curbs, but is now, because these cars are so evenly matched at the stage of the season where the drivers know their machinery, and so that is going to find it quite a task to find his way past Yarin Stern and then possibly Alexander Torrell as well. So through Double Gauche and on towards Fagnes for the leading group. And again, Ed Jones has just pulled the pin in this middle sector to move clear of Sandy Stuvik. So that would suggest that maybe Jones is running a little bit more rear wing and therefore downforce on that Team Westech car. It shows why Stuvic's so quick along the Kemmel Straight. It shows then in turn why Jones has possibly got that bit more traction through the middle section of the circuit, which is much more about mid-speed corner stability rather than out-and-out straight-line pace. As accelerating on towards the end of the lap, Artur Janos currently running in 9th position, so this would be the best finish of the season for the Polish driver who's able to get there. His first championship points of the year as well, and it's looking pretty good for Janos because he's not under particular pressure from Brandon Maisano. Behind here is the Copper Class leader, Gerardo Nieto, 7th overall, Telmex back driver, and moving increasingly clear of Chaewon Lim as well, as Nelson Mason contemplates lining up the move on Yarin Stern once more into La Source. Nieto has got sufficient advantage over Lim, 1.5 seconds, that he doesn't really need to concern himself too much at the moment with what's going on in his mirrors. Instead, it's about just trying to build that advantage as Yarin Stern, Nelson Mason through Eau Rouge, and Mason needs to get in the slipstream of Stern as early as possible to look to challenge. And as they come out of Radion, that's exactly the case. Onto the Kemmel Straight, and Stern to the inside, Mason to the outside. Now it's going to be a question of who has got the most rear wing on their car. The answer is it's probably about the same, as Mason goes through, but then has to defend from Yarin Stern on the brakes into Les Combes. Will they both get the car stopped in time? Yes, they do. And through into 4th goes Nelson Mason. Beautifully judged move that from the Canadian driver. His next target is Alexander Toril, who is not too far up the road either. Just about 0.6 of a second, no more than that. And Mason, who really took advantage of the slipstream from Yarin Stern, not only to make his way past the Israeli driver, but also just to begin to bring himself back towards Toril. It is, though, Mason's teammate, the UAE driver, Ed Jones, who leads the way, moving clear of Sandy Stuvik. And Jones, who was runner-up yesterday, Stuvik the winner. If things stay as they are, then leaving Spa, the championship positions are going to be pretty much as they were, because yesterday it was Stuvik who got the extra point for pole position, it was Jones who got the extra point for fastest lap, and at the moment that is exactly the way that looks like it's going to go again. Jones has currently set the fast lap of the race, Stuvik had pole position, so it's going to give us a very, very finely poised championship with just the 4 races to come after the checkered flag drops here in Belgium, as already Nelson Mason romping clear of Yarin Stern, and Stern, they just have to give some thought to the progress of Alexandre Cougnaud fairly quickly. But look at this for Nelson Mason. He really is driving very, very well this weekend, the Canadian. In particular, he just knows how to manage the slipstream. He knows how to get the tow from the car in front, and that's exactly what he's done. He's immediately underneath the ring of Alexander Toril. Across the line they flash, and Nelson Mason's just within half a second of Toril. What he needs to do now is try and just get Toril slightly off balance through La Source. It's Chaewon Lim coming under pressure from Artur Janos. This is the battle for 8th and 9th position. Lim currently 2nd in the Copper Class to Gerardo Nieto, and it's Richard Gonda who is 3rd in the Copper Class at the moment, and that, if it stays as it is, will be enough to give Gonda the Copper Class lead. So they go to Monza as again Nelson Mason looks to challenge Toril nice and early onto the Kemmel Straight. Ed Jones also under pressure from Sandy Stuvik, so Mason goes through past Alexander Toril, and Toril looking to fight back. Mason, though, covering the inside line for all he's worth, and he makes it stick. So through into 3rd place for Nelson Mason, and that didn't take very long at all. Now, can he get onto terms with the leaders, I wonder? Also, a switch for 5th. Alexandre Cougnaud has moved up clear of Yarin Stern. So the French driver, Alexandre Cougnaud, disappointing qualifying this morning, but otherwise his pace this weekend has really been exemplary. Cougnaud, who raced last year with the top F3 team in the Copper Class, on the podium 8 times in the Copper Class last year. This year he has been on the pace, but maybe just a little bit outshone by his RP Motorsport teammates, who've been a little bit quicker than him. So Mason in 3rd, trying to move clear of Toril, and again what he needs to do is make sure he's not under threat from Toril in the slipstream down the Kemmel Straight next time around. They have got just under 10 minutes remaining, but not for Brandon Maisano. And disappointment for the DAV racing team in what's going to have been a race of mixed emotions. One absolutely destroyed car, one that that's in the pits with mechanical issues, and the other looking very likely to claim victory in the Copper class, and also for Gerardo Nieto, comfortably his best result of the season so far. Campos Racing Team watch on from the pit wall. It's Artur Janos, who is currently their best placed driver in 8th position. It's the fight for 3rd and 4th. Arrives into the chicane at the end of the 6th lap of the race, or rather the 7th lap of the race, with Jones still though. Sandy Stuvik 9/10 of a second back. Jones has just got to be mindful here of the toe that Sandy Stuvik's getting along the Kemmel Straight, because it would seem to be that Stuvik is able, relatively speaking, to take an awful lot more out of Jones' advantage each time they head down the Kemmel Straight than Jones was able to do to Sandy Stuvik. The big question is whether or not the same setup is on the cars of Alexander Toril and Alexandra Kugno, because if that is the case, then Nelson Mason may just have something to concern himself with. So as you can see, Jones checking the mirror all the way down the Kemmel Straight. He knows that Sandy Stuvik is there. Stuvik gets to within 1.5 car lengths as they hit the brakes for Les Combes, pick their way out of Les Combes and then down towards the Bruxelles hairpin. And what Stuvik needs to do is have a really solid run through this middle sector of the lap, stay within 3/4 of a second, maybe half a second of Ed Jones, and that would be sufficient to really challenge Jones then, possibly into the chicane at the end of the lap, but more likely into Les Combes next time through. All the while, though, they are just beginning to be caught a little bit by Nelson Mason, who's closing in at a rate of 1/10 of a second a lap, and Mason is bringing with him for company Alexander Toril, Alexandra Kugno and Yarin Stern as well. So frustration for Igor Yurian, one of the drivers not able to make the started race, having been caught up in that instant behind the safety car. But the Emilio Lotta team's lead driver at the moment, Yarin Stern, is doing an excellent job of staying with this battle for 3rd place. In the meantime, though, again, Jones had a super run through the middle of the lap. It means that with probably just under 7 minutes left on the clock by the time he completes the 8th lap of the race, that he is potentially not going to be challenged by Stuvik into Les Combes on this occasion. So through the chicane, lovely stuff there from Ed Jones, just flinging the car in. A little bit of a correction on the exit. Now, has that cost him anything by way of time? Across the line he comes, and for Ed Jones, that is the fastest lap of the race for him, but it's not the fastest lap of the race overall, because that's actually now swung in favour of Nelson Mason, his teammate. So Mason in 3rd has set the fastest lap of the race at 2 minutes 17.8. Fred Jones, it was his personal best lap of the race. Here is Gerardo Nieto, 7th position, leading the Copper class. Comfortably for him, he's got the car of Artur Janos between himself and his Copper class rival, Chaewon Lim. 3rd in the Copper class remains Richard Gonda from Tommaso Mencini and Liam Venter. Damiano Favoranti completing those still running. It's down the Kemmel Straight, and this time it's Alexandra Kugno taking the turn to challenge his teammate Alexander Toril, and goes through. So Kugno up into 4th position, using the slipstream to very good effect again. And Kugno has now got a little bit of ground to make up to Nelson Mason, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. If he can get in the toe, he'll be able to do that. It now means that Toril has to immediately, it's the second car on the train with the bright orange helmet, concern himself with Yarin Stern, who's just in behind him, and Stern asking all the right questions. In particular, the Emilio Vlotta car seeming to be very, very good through the mid-speed corners. An awful lot of stability, and Yarin Stern has been very impressive this season. Comparative to some of the other drivers in the field, quite inexperienced, but he's a very smooth driver. You don't really see him going sideways that often. You don't see him making mistakes that often. He's just very precise, very smooth, very steady, and therefore you can never discount him. He's been on the podium once. That was at Paul Ricard, where he came within a hair's breadth of winning the race in very treacherous conditions, but thereafter he has just been racking up the points finishes more often than not, and that is likely to be the case again today as he tries to close in on Alexander Toril. As they head into Blanchimont, going to probably have 2, maybe 3 more laps at the end of this one. It's going to be think 3 more laps as Toril has questions asked of him by Yarin Stern as they jink through the chicane. 9 laps complete from Ed Jones. Is now a second clear of Sandy Stuvik, and Nelson Mason 2 seconds back from Stuvik, but sets another fastest lap of the race and was half a second faster than Sandy Stuvik last time around. And Alexandra Kugno, though, was almost as fast as Nelson Mason. So this race is far from settled in terms of the podium order, because you've got the 2 fastest men in the race in 3rd and 4th position at the moment, both chasing down Alexander Toril. Here he is in 5th with Yarin Stern in the black car, 6th position, and he's got a super run here, Yarin Stern, as they come onto the Kemmel Straight again, using the slipstream. He comes out of the toe very, very early, so he moves clear of Toril, immediately covers the inside line because he knows that Alexander Toril is going to look to fight back, then make sure he's able to get on the brakes with plenty of time and negotiates Les Combes. No problems there for Yarin Stern. So up into 5th position. Alexander Toril, who a few laps ago was in the podium position, is now finding himself being shuffled down through the order. He's not really got all that much time left to try and fight back. Just 3.5 minutes left in the race. So we have a look. Chaewon Lim trying to get onto terms. Artur Jan, as you can see just how close it's got for the Korean driver, the way the front nose cone's been rubbed away. Liam Venter, great to see him having a better race today, because he was an early retiree yesterday. Andres Saravia, it's not quite happened for him this weekend, currently down in 15th. As we perhaps expected for the BVM cars, the strong qualifying has not really been translated into the race. Mario Rasca, though, has raced himself up into 10th position now, so at least he's going to salvage a point from this. But look at Nelson Mason, he really is coming back towards Sandy Stuvik. He was the best part of a second faster than Stuvik through the middle sector on the lap, as Andres Saravia making the pass on Richard Gonda. This is a battle for 13th, 14th and 15th. It's Alexei Chuklin just ahead of now his teammate Andres Saravia, and Gonda under pressure from Tommaso Mencini. So that is not all sorted either for the final space on the Copper Rostrum. Across the line then, Jones leads by 1.5 seconds from Sandy Stuvik, who has been caught to the tune of 1.2 seconds by Nelson Mason last time around. It's going to be touch and go whether or not this is the last lap of the race as well. It might just be, but it's going to be by a matter of seconds. Certainly we have 2 more laps to run, and this could give Mason the opportunity to really pressurise Stuvik. Yarin Stern in 5th. He's now clear of Alexander Toril, but Alexandra Kugno has rather run off up the road and hidden. So there's not really an awful lot more that Stern can do other than make sure that Toril doesn't challenge him along the Kemmel Straight this time around. You can see the leading quartet all closing in on each other. The fastest man amongst them is Nelson Mason, with then Kugno the second fastest amongst them as they exit Les Combes. The fight for 5th and 6th now out of Les Combes, on towards the Bruxelles hairpin, and Alexander Toril suddenly beginning to come back at Yarin Stern. This pair of them hit the brakes, work around the hairpin, then they've got the sequence of the 3 left-handers, first of which sets them up for the very quick double gauche. And is this where Stern's able to pull clear of Alexander Toril, or is this where Toril looks to be able to fight back a little bit? Well, at the moment it's pretty much as we were, but into the double gauche. That's where the Emilio de Vallota car looks so strong. The RP car of Alexander Toril a little bit harder on the turn-in, which would just suggest they've maybe, as a team, gone for a slightly lower downforce setup. As the clock ticks downward, and Nelson Mason trying to close in on Sandy Stuvik. They're about to come to the end of the second section. Again, Mason 0.4 of a second faster than Stuvik. He's half a second quicker than Stuvik thus far altogether on this lap. Still Stern trying to pull clear of Toril. They enter into Blanchimont. The race leader, Ed Jones, though, about to come into the chicane. I think we might just squeeze one more lap out of this one. It's going to be very, very close, a matter of seconds. Here is Gerardo Nieto, the Copper class leader. Across the line has gone Jones. So we're into the final lap of the race now. Nieto has been caught by Chaewon Lim. So this is not settled yet for Copper class honours, because Chaewon Lim is near enough to Gerardo Nieto to possibly challenge. in the slipstream on this final lap. It's good news for Artur Janels. He's up to comfortably a season's best 7th position. Really, the pace he showed yesterday being rewarded the result today. But what can Chaewon Lim do about Gerardo Nieto? They're battling for 8th in the race overall, but more importantly to them, they're battling for class victory, plummeting down the hill once more as the race leader Ed Jones arrives into Les Combes. He has got Sandy Stuvik and Nelson Mason all closing up into his tail. The leading trio separated by just 1.5 seconds. And for Nelson Mason in particular, it's going to be a frustration. He's going to fractionally run out of laps here. But Jones has got to be careful because last time round he was the slowest of the leading trio. And fortunately, though, he's being aided a little bit on this lap by the fact that Sandy Stuvik would appear to be getting distracted by what's going on behind him rather than what's in front of him. So Ed Jones looking for his 4th victory of the season. He won at Portimao, he won at the Nürburgring, he won in spectacular fashion at Silverstone just before the summer break, and now will he win at Spa? And then that means the title battle is beautifully set up with just 4 races to go. But what would really do him a huge favour is if his teammate Nelson Mason could find a way past Sandy Stuvik on this final lap. And Mason is going superbly well here, closing in on Stuvik, and more importantly doesn't appear to be working the car any harder than he absolutely has to, which would suggest he might just be able to pull off something a bit spectacular on the brakes into the final chicane, because that really is going to be his one and only opportunity to try and find his way past the tyre driver Sandy Stuvik. Through Blanchimont they come for the final time. The checkered flag is waiting for Ed Jones, and it will be Jones who'll take the win, provided he can negotiate the chicane with no dramas. He does exactly that. So he comes out of the final chicane and he's going to take his 4th win of the season in the European E3 Open here at Spa. 2nd place does go to Sandy Stuvik, and Nelson Mason completes the rostrum from Alexandra Kugno. But what about the Copper Class win? It's Nieto from Lim. Lim looking to the outside into the chicane. He's going to go for it. He brakes later. He draws alongside Gerardo Nieto, but Nieto covers the line and the Mexican driver takes the victory in the Copper Class. What a scrap between the pair of them. And that is also 8th place for Nieto. 9th and 2nd in the class goes to Chaewon Lim. And then the Copper Class podium is not going to be completed by Richard Gonda. He spins, and it's Tommaso Mencini who finishes 3rd in the Copper Class. And with an eye to the Copper Class Championship, that is absolutely crucial, because it should give Cameron Twynham then the lead of the Copper Class going into Monza. Let's have another look at it. And Gonda, ambition 1, adhesion 0, has the spin, and just trying too hard into the final chicane. In reality, I don't think either of them were quite going to make it. But very, very frustrating for the Slovakian driver. Let's have a look then at the final results of a very, very dramatic race. So it's the win for Ed Jones, 2nd place Sandy Stuvik. So whereas we were in the championship, Nelson Mason in 3rd with the fastest lap. So that is enough for him to jump Santiago Urrutia. 4th for Alexandra Kugno, 5th Yarin Stern, 6th Alexander Torrell. Brilliant drive from Artur Janels. He's been great all weekend for 7th. Gerardo Nieto in 8th, Chaewon Lim in 9th. A pair of them looking out the top 2 spots in the Copper Class podium, which is completed by Tommaso Mencini in 14th. It was Vicky Piria who took the final point. So Richard Gonda after that spin down into 16th, just clear of Liam Venter. Damiano Favoranti completing the finishes in what was a race of attrition and drama. Those 2 large accidents on the first lap of the race, bringing out the red flag and unfortunately decimating the field. So this is where we are in terms of the championship. Sandy Stuvik leads Ed Jones by just 8 points. Nelson Mason into 3rd on 153 points, 49 points back, but crucially for him, he's now 6 points ahead of Santiago Urrutia, with Alexander Torrell consolidating 5th after a bad day for Hector Hurst. 4 races to go. Next to those will be the first weekend of October at Monza, and then we will be at Barcelona in November. So it's the 5th and 6th of October when we're in Monza, Barcelona on the 9th and 10th of November, and this is a championship battle which is likely to go all the way to the wire. Fred Jones, though, absolutely perfect race. He really got his head down and charged when he needed to, And again, he and Sandy Stuvik having a super scrap, with then Nelson Mason racing his way up through the field. It was a tiny error that cost him a couple of places on the first lap of the restart. He recovered from it beautifully. Some very, very nicely judged moves, taking advantage of the tow given off from the car in front. And so he completes the rostrum in the copper class. It is Gerardo Nieto from Che-Wan Lim, a super scrap from the pair of them. And then Tommaso Mencini completing the podium. So for Team Westtech, the opportunity to celebrate once more. 2 cars on the podium here at Spa. And the Westtech mechanics, I think, egging on Ed Jones to do a pose or a dance on the podium that he evidently promised them he'd do. For Sandy Stuvik, well, handshakes all around, but frustration as well, because, as we alluded to earlier on, it's the driver's best 14 results that count for the championship. And for Sandy Stuvik, he is unique amongst the championship contenders in that he will have to drop scores because he has been so consistent this season, whereas Ed Jones has also been very consistent but didn't participate in the first rounds of the championship due to a conflicting commitment. A replay of possibly on the slowing down lap, Gerardo Nieto pushing too hard and into the gravel trap, which is going to mean it's not the work of a moment to get him back for the podium. So let's have a look then at the highlights of a very, very dramatic race. So the lights went out and the race got underway. It was a super start from pole position from Sandy Stuvik, converting the pole. Nelson Mason wasn't away quite as well, but he did enough to see off the challenge from Ed Jones into the first turn. Alexander Turrell also trying to squeeze through into third, which he couldn't quite do. Further behind, everybody was cleanly through, and that was the way it stayed until they come on the first lap, when contact sent Santiago Urrutia launched into the air. On the BVM cars, it appeared to be the make that just brushed wheels with Urrutia. Urrutia was unharmed. It brought out the safety car when this horrific incident ensued, in particular the car of Nicholas Pola barrel rolling down the track. Fortunately, despite the number of cars involved and all the damage, everybody was completely unharmed, although I suspect some of the team bank balances won't be on Monday morning. The race, when it did get underway, was everything that we'd hoped it would be. A Jones and Stuvik battle, with then Nelson Mason charging a little bit further back. This is what caused Nelson Mason a tiny mistake, maybe disproportionately punished as the car got launched over the curbs. He wasn't the only driver. The inventor also having a few adventures as well, just caught out possibly by the cooler air temperature. For Richard Gonda, this was the opportunity, with Cameron Twynham, the copper class leader in the championship, being caught up in the earlier incident, to gain some points. So Gonda performing strongly as he chased down Gerardo Nieto and Che-Wan Lim in the lead of the copper class. All the while, though, it was Ed Jones who, having taken the early advantage from Sandy Stuvik, was able to take it all the way through to checkered flag, where he took the win. Stuvik in second and Nelson Mason in third. Gonda trying too hard to get on the copper class rostrum, spinning it away. Final turn, giving Tommaso Mencini the visit to the rostrum instead. So drivers ready behind the podium, about to be announced on to the rostrum, and this a stressful and tiring race for the drivers, because not only have they had to do the business of the race, and they've also had to maintain their composure and calm during that lengthy pause that we had in the race following the incident that brought out the safety car and subsequently the red flag. So onto the rostrum, first of all, in third place for Nelson Mason. Into second position, Sandy Stuvik. And then our race winner, Ed Jones. So Jones, his fourth time on the top step of the rostrum this season, and yet another victory for Team Westtech. So the national anthem of the United Arab Emirates in honour of Ed Jones. And now the presentation of the trophies. So first of all, third place for Nelson Mason, second place for Sandy Stuvik, and Ed Jones, the race winner, with Jonathan Kennard, in his day, a very, very fine F3 racer as well, receiving the team's trophy on behalf of Team Westtech. Now that photos have just about been posed for, it will be time to make merry on the rostrum with the champagne. It's time to let off steam after what's been a fantastic weekend of racing here at Spa in the European F3 Open. And a weekend, I think more importantly, as we move into the final four races of the season, it's still between any one of four drivers, you would say, who could claim the crown, because Santiago Urrutia and Nelson Mason, they need the cards to fall in their favour, but they've both got the talent, they've both got the pace to challenge for the championship, particularly if either Sandy Stuvik or Ed Jones stutter. Well, thus far this year, it's been nigh on faultless for Sandy Stuvik. Such consistency, it's been so impressive. But for Ed Jones, victorious today, he has demonstrated blinding pace when he's needed to, and that has been enough to give him a very, very good chance of following the wheel tracks of Nicolo Schiro in terms of being the European F3 Open champion. Moving on then to the Copper class podium. So in third place, Tommaso Mencini. Second place, Chaewon Lim for Emilio de Vallota Motorsport. And then Gerardo Nieto for DAV Racing. Difficult race this for DAV Racing, but what better way for their driver to repay them? And on with the presentation of the trophies. So for Mencini in third position, Chaewon Lim, a super drive from the Korean in second, and Gerardo Nieto, an excellent win in the Copper class. And for DAV Racing, so as the drivers celebrate on the rostrum here at Spa, it's been a brilliant weekend's racing here in the European F3 Open. And so for myself, Ben Evans, thank you as ever for your company, and we will look very much forward to you joining us in Monza in a few weeks' time, and then subsequently in Barcelona when the title fights, the European F3 Open, will go all the way to the wire. For now, the drivers and teams can relax, but the hard work will start again tomorrow morning as they make the push towards the final four races of the championship. But for now, they can enjoy themselves as we'll say goodbye from Spa-Francorchamps as the champagne flies on the rostrum.